The alarm sirens echoed through the massive halls of the Galactic Council building. Red lights flashed on every wall, telling everyone that something terrible was happening. Council Prime Minister Veltar ran down the corridor as fast as his 4 arms could carry him. His blue skin was covered in sweat, and his large eyes showed pure fear. In the main council chamber, representatives from hundreds of different alien species were gathering. Some looked like giant insects with hard shells. Others were tall and thin with glowing skin. A few had tentacles instead of arms. But all of them shared the same expression of terror. Veltar reached the center platform and grabbed the speaking device with his shaking hands. The crowd went quiet, waiting to hear the bad news they all knew was coming. "Fellow council members," Veltar began, his voice breaking slightly, "we have received the final transmission from the Kepler colonies. The Zephyrian Collective has destroyed another star system, 12 billion lives, gone." A wave of horrified sounds filled the chamber. Some aliens clicked their mandibles in distress. Others made low humming noises that meant sadness in their language. The bird-like Altarians fluffed their feathers and screeched. Defense Marshal Klixana stood up from her seat. Her crystal-like body reflected the red emergency lights, making her look like she was on fire. "This makes 43 systems destroyed in the last 3 cycles," she announced. "The Zephyrians are moving faster than we predicted. Their bioships are getting stronger with each battle." The large screen at the front of the chamber lit up, showing a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked the destroyed worlds. There were so many red dots that they looked like a spreading disease across the star map. "They learn from every fight," Marshal Klixana continued. "When we attacked with plasma weapons, they grew armor that blocked plasma. When we used quantum bombs, they became immune to quantum bombs. Each time we think we have found a way to stop them, they adapt and become stronger." An elderly delegate from the Centauri system raised one of his 6 hands. "How long do we have before they reach the core worlds?" Marshal Klixana looked at her data tablet. Her crystal face showed no emotion, but her voice was grim. 6 months. "Maybe less if they keep getting stronger." The chamber exploded into chaos. Aliens were shouting in dozens of different languages. Some were demanding immediate evacuation of their home worlds. Others wanted to surrender before the Zephyrians arrived. A few suggested they should scatter across the galaxy and hope the Zephyrians would not find them. In the back corner of the chamber, Ambassador Cain Rodriguez sat quietly in his chair. He was the only human in the building, and he looked very different from all the other delegates. While they wore fancy robes and jewelry, Cain wore a simple military uniform. He was not very tall, and his brown hair was cut short. To most of the aliens, he looked like a primitive creature from a backwards world. Cain had been listening to the emergency broadcasts for weeks. Earth's government had been analyzing the Zephyrian threat since the first attacks. The human military had been running computer simulations and studying every piece of data they could find about these bioships. Veltar raised his 4 arms, trying to get the crowd to be quiet. "Please, everyone, we must remain calm. Our combined fleets are preparing for one final battle. All of our best ships, all of our most advanced weapons, will fail just like all the others," interrupted a voice from the back. Everyone turned to look at Cain Rodriguez. He was standing up slowly, his dark eyes scanning the room. Many of the aliens had never seen a human before. They had heard stories about Earth, though. They called it a death world because the environment was so dangerous that most galactic species could not survive there. "Ambassador Rodriguez," Veltar said carefully, "while we appreciate your concern, I do not think this is the time for—" "It is exactly the time," Cain said, walking toward the center platform. His boots made loud clicking sounds on the metal floor. "You have been fighting the Zephyrians for 3 years. You have lost every major battle. Your fleets are scattered, your colonies are burning, and your people are dying." The alien delegates whispered among themselves. Some seemed offended that this primitive human was talking to them like this. Others looked curious about what he might say next. Cain reached the speaking platform and looked out at the crowd. "You Want to know why you keep losing? It is because you are fighting them like civilized beings. You are trying to match their technology. You are playing by rules that they do not follow. Marshal Clixana's crystal body flashed brighter. And what would you suggest, human? Your species has barely mastered space travel. What could Earth possibly offer that our advanced civilizations cannot provide? Kane was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, but there was something dangerous in his tone. You are right. We are not as advanced as you. We do not have your plasma weapons or your quantum shields. Our ships are slower and our computers are simpler. He paused and looked directly at Marshal Clixana. But we know how to fight things that are trying to kill us. We have been doing it for our entire history. Explain, demanded Valtar Kane. Touched a button on his wrist device. A hologram appeared showing planet Earth. The blue and green world looked beautiful, but Kane started pointing out details that made the aliens gasp. This is our world, Kane said. The atmosphere contains poison gases that would kill most of you in minutes. The weather includes storms that can level entire cities. We have earthquakes that crack the ground open, volcanoes that destroy everything, for hundreds of miles, and floods that wash away mountains. The hologram changed to show Earth's wildlife. Giant predators with massive teeth, tiny creatures that carried deadly diseases, plants that could kill with a single touch. Everything on our planet is trying to kill us, Kane continued. The air, the water, the weather, the animals, the plants, even the bacteria. We did not evolve to be peaceful explorers or brilliant scientists. We evolved to survive when the entire universe wants us dead. The chamber was completely silent. Now, even the emergency alarm seemed quieter. Kane looked around the room at all the frightened alien faces. You asked what we could offer. We can offer something that none of your advanced civilizations have ever needed to learn. We can offer the knowledge of how to fight when losing means extinction. An ambassador from the Rigel system spoke up. But surely your primitive weapons cannot ... Our primitive weapons, Kane interrupted, are designed to kill things that do not want to die. We have been perfecting the art of warfare for 50,000 years. Not against other civilized species who follow rules, but against a hostile universe that follows no rules at all. Kane turned back to Veltar. The Zephyrians think they are the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. They have never met humans. They have never fought someone from a death world. They are about to learn what it means to threaten something that a human cares about. The Prime Minister's eye stalks drooped slightly. What are you proposing, Ambassador? Kane's expression was serious. Give us permission to mobilize the human fleet. Let us show the Zephyrians what happens when they pick a fight with Deathworlders. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then Veltar slowly nodded his large head. Very well, Ambassador Rodriguez. Earth has permission to deploy its forces. Though, I must ask ... how many ships can humanity provide? Kane smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a friendly smile. All of them. 3 days after the Emergency Council meeting, the first human ships started arriving at the Vega Nebula. The alien observers watched in confusion as more and more vessels appeared from hyperspace jumps. These ships looked nothing like the elegant, smooth designs that other galactic species preferred. The human ships were ugly. They were big, square, and covered in thick armor plating. Strange antenna arrays stuck out in all directions. Most shocking of all, every ship was covered with weapon systems. Missile pods, gun turrets, and launch tubes were bolted onto every available surface. Commander Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the UFS Defiance, looking at the tactical screens that showed enemy positions. Her ship was one of the smaller vessels in the human fleet, but it carried more weapons than most alien dreadnoughts. Lisa had short blonde hair and calm blue eyes, but her crew knew she was one of the toughest officers in the human Space Force. Captain Morrison, what do you think? Of these bioships? Lisa asked her second-in-command. Captain Jake Morrison was a tall man with dark skin and a serious expression. He had been studying the alien reports about Zephyrian tactics for hours. They adapt fast, Commander. Maybe too fast for their own good, Lisa raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Jake pointed to the data on his screen. Look at this pattern. Every time the Council forces attacked, the Zephyrians changed to counter that specific attack. They learned to stop plasma weapons, so they built armor that blocked plasma. They learned to avoid quantum bombs, so they developed shields against quantum energy. That sounds like a smart strategy, Lisa said. Jake shook his head. It would be smart if they were fighting other aliens. But they are not fighting other aliens anymore. They are fighting humans, Lisa understood immediately. She smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. They learned to fight the last enemy they faced, Lisa said. But we are not the last enemy they faced. Exactly, Jake replied. They have never fought humans before. They have no idea what is coming. On the flagship USS Liberty, Admiral Ben Carter was meeting with his top commanders. The strategy room was filled with holographic displays showing the locations of Zephyrian forces. Carter was an older man with gray hair and scars on his hands. From his early days as a ground soldier, he had fought in 3 different wars before joining the Space Force. Ladies and gentlemen, Carter began, we are dealing with an enemy that adapts to whatever we throw at them. The Council has been trying to out-technology them. That does not work. Colonel Amy Foster leaned forward from her position at the tactical table. She was a short woman with red hair and green eyes that seemed to see everything. What is our approach then, sir? Carter walked over to a display showing Earth's military history. Pictures of ancient battles flashed across the screen. Soldiers with swords, cavalry charges, tank battles, and fighter planes filled the display. We are going to do what humans have always done when facing a superior enemy, Carter said. We are going to fight dirty. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication system from his ship. Define dirty, sir. Carter's expression became grim. The Zephyrians have adapted to energy weapons. They expect us to use plasma cannons and particle beams. They have built defenses against those weapons. What are we using instead? Asked Colonel Foster. Rocks, Carter said simply. The commanders looked confused until Carter explained further. Kinetic weapons, mass drivers, railguns, good old-fashioned bullets and missiles with explosive warheads. The Zephyrians have never faced kinetic weapons because the Council thinks they are too primitive. Captain Sarah Lee spoke up from her position aboard the USS Vengeance. She was a young woman with black hair and a reputation for being fearless in battle. Sir, kinetic weapons work well, but they have limits. How do we make sure we kill these bioships completely? Carter smiled the same dangerous smile that Lisa had shown earlier. We board them. The room went silent. Boarding actions were something that galactic civilization had not used for centuries. The idea of sending soldiers inside an enemy ship to fight hand-to-hand was considered barbaric. Sir, Colonel Foster said carefully, the Council species stopped using boarding tactics because they considered them too violent. The Council species, Carter replied, have never had to fight for their survival on a death world. We have every day for 50,000 years. He walked to another display that showed human soldiers in powered armor. These bioships regenerate. Damage, they heal themselves. But they cannot heal if we blow up their vital organs from the inside. Meanwhile, in the observation area of the Liberty, Ambassador Rodriguez stood with several alien delegates who had come to watch the human preparations. Veltar was there, along with Marshal Klixana and representatives from a dozen other species. Ambassador, Veltar said nervously, your fleet seems to be preparing for a very aggressive approach. Rodriguez nodded. That is correct. The weapons your ships carry appear to be quite primitive by galactic standards, Marshal Klixana observed. Are you certain they will be effective? Rodriguez turned to look at the alien delegation. Marshal, let me ask you something. What is the most dangerous animal on your homeworld? Klixana thought for a moment. The crystal stalkers. They are large predators with natural armor and energy weapons. Very difficult to kill. How do your people deal with them when they threaten your cities? We use advanced stun weapons that disrupt their nervous systems. It is clean and efficient, Rodriguez nodded. That works because crystal stalkers have nervous systems like yours. The weapons were designed specifically for creatures from your world. He pointed toward the view screen that showed the human fleet. Humans come from a world where everything wants to kill us. We learned long ago that the best way to kill something is not to outthink it or out-technology it. The best way is to hit it with something big and heavy until it stops moving. The aliens looked uncomfortable. This kind of talk went against everything their civilizations believed about proper conduct. But surely, Veltar said, there must be more civilized ways to ... Civilized ways do not work against the Zephyrians, Rodriguez interrupted. You have tried civilized ways for 3 years. How many of your people died while you were being civilized? Veltar's eye stalks drooped. He could not argue with that logic. Ambassador, Marshal Clixana said quietly, what happens after you defeat the Zephyrians? Will humans expect to rule the galaxy? Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was serious but not threatening. Marshal, humans do not want to rule the galaxy. We want to go home to our families and our lives. But we also want our friends to be safe. The council species are our friends now. He paused and looked directly at each alien representative. We are going to eliminate the Zephyrian threat completely. When we are done, there will be no Zephyrians left to threaten anyone ever again. Then we will go home. And if another threat appears in the future? Veltar asked. Rodriguez smiled, but this time it was a reassuring smile instead of a dangerous one. Then you call us again, and we will come again. With everything we have. In the distance, more human ships were arriving. Transport vessels carried soldiers and marines. Supply ships brought ammunition and equipment. Warships that looked like floating weapons platforms took up defensive positions. The Zephyrians had never faced anything like what was coming for them. They had fought civilized enemies who followed rules and tried to minimize casualties. They had never fought an enemy that viewed their complete destruction as the only acceptable outcome. They were about to learn the difference between fighting explorers and fighting survivors. Admiral Carter's voice echoed across the fleet communication system. All ships, prepare for combat operations. We jump to enemy territory in 6 hours. Remember, people, we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for every innocent life in this galaxy. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of human determination. The Zephyrians made a mistake. They threatened our friends. Now they get to find out why humans are the only species that survived on a death world. The Helix colony had been beautiful once. 12 million people from 6 different species had lived there in peace. They had built cities that floated in the clouds and farms that grew food in zero gravity. Now there was nothing left but debris. And the massive bioships that had consumed everything, the Zephyrian fleet, looked like a swarm of giant insects floating in space. Their ships were alive, made of organic material that pulsed with energy. Some were as big as cities, others were smaller but moved faster than anything the Galactic Council had ever built. They fed on the metal and energy from destroyed worlds. Growing stronger with each victory, Swarm Prime Zaxthel was the leader of this particular group of bioships. He was an ancient creature thousands of years old with a body that was part insect and part machine. His consciousness was connected to every ship in his swarm through organic neural networks. Zaxthel felt the approach of new ships through his sensory web. These vessels were different from the usual Council forces. They were smaller, cruder-looking, and moving in patterns that seemed almost random. New prey approaches, Zaxthel communicated to his swarm through bioelectric signals. Stand them. Learn their weapons. Prepare to adapt. The forward bioships extended their sensor organs and began analyzing the approaching human fleet. The data they collected confused them. These ships carried weapons that seemed primitive compared to what they had faced before. No plasma cannons detected, reported one of his sub-commanders. No quantum weapons, no particle beams. What are these creatures using? Before Zaxthel could respond, the human ships opened fire. Commander Hayes watched her tactical display. As the first wave of kinetic rounds left her ship's mass drivers, all ships execute Plan Alpha, full kinetic bombardment. The human fleet fired weapons that the Zephyrians had never encountered. Mass drivers hurled chunks of depleted uranium. At incredible speeds, railguns shot tungsten rods that could punch through a mountain. Missile pods launched old-fashioned, explosive warheads that relied on chemical reactions instead of exotic energy. The first bioship to get hit simply disappeared. The tungsten rod from the USS Liberty's main rail gun went through its organic hull like a bullet through paper. The creature inside died instantly, and the bioship began to drift dead in space. Zachthel felt the death of his subordinate through the neural link. The shock was incredible. His bioships were supposed to be nearly indestructible. Their adaptive armor had protected them against every weapon the Council had used. "Impossible," he hissed through his communication organs. "Our armor adapts to any energy weapon. These attacks should not be effective." But they were not energy weapons, they were simple, brutal, kinetic force. The bioship's adaptive armor was designed to absorb and deflect energy. It could not adapt to solid matter traveling at tremendous speed. Captain Morrison's voice came through the fleet communication system. "Target the big one in the center. All ships focus fire on the command vessel." Hundreds of kinetic weapons targeted Zachthel's massive bioship. The creature tried to move, but it was too big and too slow. Tungsten rods, uranium slugs, and explosive missiles hammered into its hull. Organic armor that had turned away plasma beams was torn apart like wet cloth. But Commander Hayes had more than just ship-to-ship weapons. "Launch the assault pods," she ordered. Small, armored vehicles detached from the human ships and streaked toward the damaged bioships. These were not missiles or unmanned drones. They carried human soldiers who were about to do something that no galactic species had attempted in centuries. Staff Sergeant Rick Palmer felt his assault pod slam into the hull of a bioship. The impact would have killed most alien species, but Rick's powered armor absorbed the shock. Around him, his squad prepared their equipment and checked their weapons. "Hull breach successful," Rick reported through his radio. Moving into the target. The inside of the bioship was like being inside a giant animal. The walls pulsed with bioelectric energy. Strange organic computers lined the corridors. The air was thick with gases that would poison most galactic species, but Rick's armor filtered out the toxins. "Contact front," called out Corporal Nina. Brooks from the point position, a Zephyrian warrior form, came around the corner. It was 3 meters tall, with 4 arms ending in bioweapons that could fire acid or energy bolts. Its natural armor looked strong enough to stop most conventional weapons. Rick did not try to match the creature's technology. He pulled out his assault rifle and fired 3 rounds into its center mass. The bullets were simple lead and copper, propelled by chemical explosives that humans had been using for hundreds of years. The warrior form staggered but did not fall. Its organic armor had absorbed some of the impact. Rick followed up by throwing a fragmentation grenade. The explosion in the confined space was devastating. Simple metal fragments shredded the creature's body. "Target down," Rick reported. Continuing to objective. Similar fights were happening throughout the bioship. Human soldiers moved through the organic corridors with weapons that seemed primitive but were incredibly effective. Plasma cutters sliced through biometal. Explosive charges destroyed vital systems. Combat knives and even hammers proved useful when fighting in close quarters. The Zephyrians inside their own ships were not prepared for this kind of combat. They had evolved to fight ship-to-ship battles and consume planets. They had never faced armed enemies inside their own vessels. Corporal Brooks reached the bioship's neural center, a massive organic brain that controlled all the ship's functions. "Neural core located," she reported, planting demolition charges. The explosives that followed were not exotic quantum bombs or plasma devices. They were simple chemical explosives, the same type that humans had used in mining operations for centuries. but they were incredibly effective against biological targets. The explosion killed the bioship instantly. Its neural network was severed, and the entire vessel went dead in space across the battlefield. Zachthel watched in horror as his swarm was being systematically destroyed. These human creatures were not fighting like any enemy he had ever faced. They did not try to out-technology his bioships. They simply smashed them with brute force and then sent soldiers inside to finish the job. "Retreat," he ordered desperately. "Signal the collective. Tell them these creatures are different. They do not fight like the others," but retreat was not easy. The human ships were faster than they looked, and they seemed to know exactly where the bioships would try to run. Every escape route was blocked by ships firing those terrible kinetic weapons. Admiral Carter watched the battle from his command center aboard the Liberty. The tactical displays showed bioships dying one after another. Some tried to adapt their armor, but kinetic weapons did not work like energy weapons. There was no frequency to adjust to, no energy pattern to learn. It was just mass times velocity equals dead bioship. "Sir," reported Captain Lee from the Vengeance, "the enemy is trying to retreat." "Should we pursue?" Carter's expression was cold. "Negative. Let a few escape. I want them to report back to their collective." Colonel Foster looked confused. "Sir, why let any of them get away?" Carter smiled that dangerous smile again. "Because I want the rest of the Zephyrians to know what happened here. I want them to be afraid. Fear makes enemies make mistakes." Back on the observation deck of the Liberty, the alien delegates watched the battle with a mixture of awe and horror. They had never seen anything like this level of systematic destruction. "By the stars," whispered Veltar. "They are not just defeating the bioships, they are slaughtering them." Marshal Klixana's crystal body was dim with shock. "The humans are boarding the enemy vessels. That is barbaric, uncivilized." Ambassador Rodriguez stood quietly beside them, watching his people. "Do what they did best?" "No," he said softly. "That is survival. That is what you do when something threatens your family." On the battlefield, the last few bioships managed to escape into hyperspace. They carried news of the disaster back to the Zephyrian collective. For the first time in their species' history, they had met an enemy that was more dangerous than they were. Staff Sergeant Palmer and his squad finished clearing their bioship and prepared for extraction. Around them, the organic corridors were dark and silent. The creature that had once been a mighty weapon of the collective was now just dead meat floating in space. "All clear," Palmer reported. "Bioship secured and neutralized." As the human assault pods returned to their ships, they left behind something the galaxy had not seen in centuries. Complete victory. Total destruction of the enemy. No prisoners, no negotiations, no attempts at understanding or communication. Just the cold, efficient elimination of a threat. Commander Hayes looked at the tactical display showing the debris field that had once been a Zephyrian swarm. "All ships report status." "Minimal damage," came the reports from across the fleet. "All personnel accounted for. Mission successful." Hayes nodded with satisfaction. "Set course for the rally point?" "Admiral Carter wants to debrief before we move to the next target." Because there would be a next target, and another after that. The humans had learned something important from this battle. The Zephyrians could be killed, and if they could be killed, they would be killed, all of them. The news of the defeat at Helix Colony spread through the Zephyrian collective like wildfire. For the first time in their long history, an entire swarm had been destroyed. Not defeated, not damaged, but completely eliminated. The survivors who escaped brought terrifying reports of creatures that fought without honor or civilization. In the deep space fortress at Kepler 442, the greatest gathering of Zephyrian bioships in history was taking place. Thousands of the massive organic vessels floated in formation, their hulls pulsing with shared energy as they prepared for what their leaders called the final consumption. Swarm Prime Velcrin was the oldest of the collective leaders. His bioship was ancient and huge, with armor that had been growing and adapting for over 10,000 years. Around him, 4 other swarm primes commanded their own fleets. Together, they represented every military asset the Zephyrian Collective possessed. "The small mammals have destroyed Zaxthel-S entire swarm," Velcrin communicated through the bio-neural network. "This cannot be allowed to continue. We will gather all our forces and crush them before they can threaten the collective." Swarm Prime. Cathara, whose ships specialized in rapid assault, sent waves of agreement through the network. "These humans fight like wild beasts. They have no understanding of proper warfare. We will teach them the price of opposing the collective." But Zaxthel-S surviving consciousness, now housed in a smaller bioship, transmitted urgent warnings. "Do not underestimate them. Their weapons bypass our adaptive armor. Their soldiers board our ships and destroy us from within. They fight to kill, not to capture or control." The other swarm primes dismissed his concerns. They had never lost a major battle. Their bioships had consumed 43 star systems and defeated every Galactic Council fleet sent against them. A few primitive mammals from a backward world could not possibly threaten the might of the entire collective. They were wrong. At the edge of the Kepler 442 system, the human fleet emerged from hyperspace. But this was not the same force that had fought at Helix Colony. Admiral Carter had called in every available ship from Earth and the human colonies. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels stretched across space like a metal cloud, but the most important ships were the ones that carried special cargo. Research vessels that had been converted into weapons platforms. Transport. Ships filled with equipment that had never been used in galactic warfare. And medical ships that carried doctors who specialized in biological weapons. Dr. Sarah Kim stood in the laboratory aboard the research ship UFS Darwin, looking at samples of Zephyrian biomaterial through her microscope. She was a small woman with dark hair and intense brown eyes. Her specialty was creating synthetic diseases that could target specific genetic codes. "How long until the bioweapons are ready?" asked Dr. Paul Wright, the fleet's chief xenobiologist. He was a tall man with gray hair who had spent his career studying alien life forms. "Another 6 hours," Dr. Kim replied. "The synthetic viruses are designed to attack the organic components of Zephyrian bioships. They will spread through their neural networks and cause system failures that look like natural decay." Dr. Wright nodded grimly. "The Council species would never approve of biological warfare. They consider it too dangerous." The Council species," Dr. Kim said quietly, "have never faced extinction. We have. Multiple times in our history. We know that sometimes you have to use terrible weapons to prevent even more terrible outcomes." On the bridge of the Liberty, Admiral Carter studied the tactical displays showing the massive Zephyrian fleet. There were over 2,000 bioships of various sizes, all connected through organic neural networks. It was the largest enemy force humanity had ever faced. "Sir," reported Captain Morrison from his position at the tactical station, "enemy force strength is beyond anything we have encountered. Even with our full fleet, we are outnumbered 10 to 1. Carter was quiet for a moment, studying the enemy formations. Then he smiled that cold, dangerous smile that his officers knew meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Captain, signal all ships. Implement Protocol Omega." Protocol Omega was something that had never been used before. It was humanity's ultimate contingency plan for facing an extinction-level threat, the kind of warfare that civilized species had banned because it was too terrible to contemplate. The human fleet moved into attack formation, but their initial assault was different from the battle at Helix Colony. This time, they opened fire with conventional weapons first. Drawing the Zephyrian fleet into close combat, the bioships responded exactly as predicted. They moved to surround the human fleet, confident that their superior numbers would guarantee victory. Their adaptive armor began adjusting to counter the kinetic weapons they had learned about from the survivors. That was when the humans deployed their real weapons. Dr. Kim watched her bioweapon deployment systems activate from her laboratory. "Viral packages launching now," she reported to the bridge. "Estimated infection time is 30 minutes. Invisible to sensors, clouds of synthetic viruses spread through space and attached themselves to the hulls of the Zephyrian bioships. The viruses had been specifically designed to target the genetic codes that made Zephyrian biotechnology possible. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The bioships continued their attack, firing their energy weapons and trying to close distance for ramming attacks. But then the infection began to spread. Swarm Prime Velkring felt something wrong through his neural connection. One of his scout ships was reporting system failures that made no sense. The bio-armor was developing what looked like cancer. The neural networks were breaking down. The organic computers were dying. Impossible, he transmitted to his fleet. Our bioforms are immune to disease. We have natural defenses against all known pathogens. But these were not known pathogens. They were synthetic viruses created by a species that had been fighting biological warfare since before they left their home planet. Diseases that attacked cellular structures that existed nowhere in nature except in Zephyrian bio-technology. Within an hour, half the Zephyrian fleet was infected. Bioships that had been nearly invulnerable began to decay from within. Their hulls developed holes. Their weapons stopped working. Their ability to adapt was turned against them as the viruses used their own biological systems to spread the infection. But the humans were not finished. As the bioships writhed in synthetic plague, human assault pods launched once again. This time they carried specialists with very specific orders. Combat engineers whose job was not just to destroy enemy ships, but to make sure they could never regenerate. Lieutenant Colonel Pete Johnson led the assault on Velkrin's command vessel. His team moved through the dying bioship with flamethrowers and thermite charges. Every organic computer, every genetic storage bank, every piece of biological material that could potentially be used to rebuild the collective was systematically destroyed. Neural core located, reported Master Sergeant Linda Torres. It is some kind of organic supercomputer. Looks like it contains genetic templates for their entire species. Burn it all, Johnson ordered. Make sure nothing survives. The thermite charges that followed burned at temperatures hot enough to sterilize everything they touched. Not just kill, but completely destroy any possibility of regeneration or resurrection. Similar operations were taking place throughout the Zephyrian fleet. Human soldiers moved through dying bioships like antibodies through an infected organism, eliminating every trace of the enemy's ability to continue existing. Swarm Prime Velkrin felt his ancient consciousness beginning to fade as the viruses attacked his own biological systems. Through his failing neural networks, he could sense the death of his entire species. Not just defeat, but extinction. "What are you?" He transmitted weakly to the human ships. Admiral Carter's response came through the communication systems in perfect Zephyrian. "We are what happens when you threaten innocent people. We are what evolution creates when everything in the universe tries to kill you for 50,000 years. Carter paused, watching the tactical display as the last bioships died in space. "We are Deathworlders. And you made the mistake of making us angry." Within 6 hours, the battle was over. The largest military force in Zephyrian history had been completely eliminated. Not a single bioship survived. Not a single genetic sample remained intact. The synthetic viruses had done their work so thoroughly that even the debris was biologically dead. On the observation deck of the Liberty, the alien delegates stood in shocked silence. They had watched the systematic extinction of an entire species carried out with cold, scientific efficiency. "By all the stars," whispered Veltar, "they did not just defeat the Zephyrians. They eliminated them completely." Marshal Clixana S. Crystal body was dim with horror. The biological weapons, the total destruction of genetic material. This goes beyond warfare. This is genocide. Ambassador Rodriguez stood quietly beside them, watching the cleanup operations. "No," he said softly. "This is pest control. The Zephyrians were not just enemies. They were a plague that consumed entire civilizations. Sometimes, when you face a plague, the only solution is complete eradication. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, the Galactic Council building was busier than it had ever been. Ships from hundreds of worlds came and went daily, carrying delegates who wanted to witness the emergency session that would change the galaxy forever. The great chamber was packed beyond capacity. Every seat was filled, and many delegates stood along the walls. The atmosphere was tense, filled with whispered conversations in dozens of different languages. Some species seemed excited, others appeared nervous, and a few looked genuinely frightened. Ambassador Rodriguez walked slowly to the central podium. He wore the same simple military uniform he had worn months ago when he first addressed the council, but everything else had changed. The way the alien delegates looked at him was different now. There was respect in their eyes, but also something else, fear. Honorable members of the Galactic Council, Rodriguez began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. I am here to deliver the final report on the Zephyrian threat. The chamber went completely silent. Every being present leaned forward to hear what the human ambassador would say. The Zephyrian collective has been eliminated, Rodriguez announced. Our scientific teams have confirmed the complete destruction of their military forces, their breeding colonies, and their genetic storage facilities. The threat to galactic civilization has been permanently removed. The chamber erupted. Some species cheered and celebrated, making sounds of joy in their native languages. Others remained quiet, their expressions troubled by what they had witnessed during their campaign. Council Prime Minister Veltar raised his forearms for silence. When the noise died down, he spoke carefully. Ambassador Rodriguez, on behalf of all member species, the Council expresses its gratitude for humanity's intervention. Without your assistance, our civilizations would have faced extinction. There was polite applause, but it felt forced. Many delegates clapped because they knew they should, not because they wanted to, Veltar continued, his voice more hesitant. Now, however, the Council has some concerns about the methods that were employed during the campaign. Rodriguez nodded calmly. You are referring to the biological weapons and the complete extermination strategy. Yes, Veltar replied. While we understand that desperate times require desperate measures, the use of synthetic viruses and the total elimination of an entire species raises serious questions about galactic law and acceptable conduct in warfare. Defense Marshal Klixana stood up from her seat. Her crystal body flickered nervously as she spoke. Ambassador, the weapons your species used have been banned by galactic treaty for over 1,000 years. Biological warfare is considered a crime against all sentient life. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, studying the faces of the various delegates. He could see the conflict in their expressions. They were grateful to be alive, but horrified by how their salvation had been achieved. Marshal, Rodriguez said finally, let me ask you a question. How many civilizations did the Zephyrians destroy before we stopped them? 43 confirmed, Klixana replied reluctantly. How many billion lives were lost? Klixana's light dimmed. Approximately 230 billion sentient beings. Rodriguez let that number hang in the air for a moment. And how many lives would have been lost if we had continued to fight them using conventional methods? The chamber was uncomfortably silent. Everyone knew the answer. The Zephyrians had been adapting to every conventional weapon. Without human intervention, they would have consumed the entire galaxy. The biological weapons we used were specifically designed to target Zephyrian biotechnology, Rodriguez continued. They cannot affect any other known life forms. We did not create a galactic plague. We created a very precise tool to eliminate a very specific threat. An elderly delegate from the Centauri system raised one of his 6 hands. But the precedent, this sets, Ambassador. If humans are willing to use such weapons against one enemy, what stops you from using them against others? Rodriguez's expression became serious. Senator, let me be very clear about something. Humans did not want to use biological weapons. We did not enjoy watching an entire species die. But we made a choice. He paused and looked around the chamber. We chose to sacrifice our moral comfort to save innocent lives. We chose to become the monsters so that you could remain civilized. The chamber was so quiet that the only sound was the humming of the life support systems. You asked what stops us from using these weapons against others, Rodriguez continued. The answer is simple. We only use them against threats to innocent life. The Zephyrians were not just enemies. They were a plague that consumed entire civilizations. They had to be stopped completely. From the observation gallery, Admiral Carter watched the proceedings with interest. Beside him, Commander Hayes whispered, "Think they will ask us to leave the council?" Carter shook his head slightly. "No, they are scared of us now, but they are more scared of the next threat that might come along. They know they need us." Back. On the floor, another delegate spoke up. This one was from the Rigel colonies, a species that looked like tall, thin birds with bright feathers. "Ambassador Rodriguez, what are humanity's intentions now? Will you be seeking expanded territory or additional resources as payment for your services?" Rodriguez almost smiled at the question. "No, we are going home." The simple answer seemed to surprise many delegates. They had expected demands for territory, resources, or political power. Most species that won major military victories used them to expand their influence. "Home?" Veltar asked, confused. "But surely humanity deserves some form of compensation for saving galactic civilization." "We already have our compensation," Rodriguez replied. "Our friends are safe. Our allies can continue to exist and explore and build their civilizations. That is all we wanted." Marshal Clixana leaned forward. "And if another threat appears in the future? Another enemy that conventional forces cannot defeat?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Then you call us, and we will come." "With your full fleet?" asked the Centauri delegate. "With everything we have," Rodriguez confirmed. "Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. Whatever it takes to protect innocent life." A delegate from the Outer Rim colonies stood up. She was a small, furry creature with large eyes. "Ambassador, many of our people are now afraid of humans. They see you as dangerous, unpredictable. How do we explain to our children that their protectors are also the most frightening beings in the galaxy?" Rodriguez considered the question carefully. It was probably the most honest question he had been asked all day. "Tell them," he said finally, "that sometimes the universe is a dangerous place. Tell them that there are things in the darkness that want to hurt innocent people. And tell them that humans stand guard in that darkness so they can sleep safely." He paused and looked directly at the small delegate. "Tell them that humans are not the monsters they should fear. We are the monsters that other monsters fear." The chamber was silent again. The weight of that statement settled over the delegates like a blanket. They began to understand what they had gained and what it meant for the future. As the session moved toward its conclusion, Veltar made one final statement. "The Galactic Council hereby recognizes humanity's contribution to galactic security. Earth will be granted full membership status and voting rights in all council matters." There was applause, but it was subdued. The council was grateful, but they were also aware that they had just invited apex predators to join their peaceful organization. Ambassador Rodriguez accepted the honor graciously, then delivered his final words to the assembly. "Members of Galactic Council, humanity did not ask to become the galaxy's guardians. We wanted to be explorers, scientists, diplomats. But we have learned something about ourselves in this conflict." He looked around the chamber one last time. "When innocent lives are threatened, humans will do whatever is necessary to protect them. We will use any weapon, face any enemy, pay any price. And we will sleep soundly afterward, knowing that somewhere in the galaxy, children are safe because we were willing to be terrible." The session ended quietly. Delegates filed out in small groups, speaking in hushed tones about what they had witnessed and what it meant for the future. In the weeks that followed, ships began departing for their home systems. The human fleet packed up their weapons and headed back to Earth, but they left behind monitoring stations and communication relays. Just in case, the galaxy had learned an important lesson. There were now guardians watching from the darkness. Guardians who would answer any call for help, No matter how dangerous the threat, and somewhere in the deep space between the stars, potential enemies that might have emerged in the future suddenly found other directions to expand. Because the galaxy was no longer UNDEFENDED, the Deathworlders were watching.